Michael Faraday. The dude who gave us the concept of electricity and literally lit up the world, but probably not on purpose. His whole life was one big science experiment, only he wasn't sure what the results were going to be. Let's take a wild ride through his life, shall we? Born on September 22nd, 1791, in Newington Butts, London, not a name you want to brag about at dinner parties, Michael Faraday came into the world as the son of a poor blacksmith. That's right. Faraday wasn't born with a silver spoon, more like a rusty metal fork and a hammer. His dad was sickly and couldn't provide much of a luxurious lifestyle. But hey, little Michael didn't need riches. He had science to fall back on. Faraday's education? Oh, you mean the school of life, right? No fancy private schools or Ivy League for Michael. Faraday was mostly self-taught. At the age of 13, he was sent to work as an apprentice to a local bookbinder, which was probably the most boring job ever, unless you're into smelling glue and being around things that are literally bound to be dull. But Faraday wasn't just binding books, he was reading them. A lot. You've got to respect a guy who can still make something out of nothing, like literally anything. He probably read Science for Dummies before it was cool. At 14, Faraday attended lectures by the famous scientist Humphrey Davy. Imagine how that went. "Excuse me, Mr. Davy, can I sit in on your lecture? I swear, I'm not just here to steal your lunch." Well, Davy, being the big brain he was, hired Faraday as his assistant. And just like that, Faraday's life changed forever. Because who doesn't want a job where your boss is, quite literally, a legend? As Davy's assistant, Faraday got to work with the big guns of the scientific world. Now, Davy didn't just mess around with anything normal. He was exploring the wonders of chemistry and electrical phenomena. Faraday, ever the eager beaver, would take notes on everything, except when Davy was talking about his bad hair day. Well, we don't know about the hair, but it's a good guess. But Faraday's real aha moment came when he decided to stop just watching experiments and start doing his own. He began to experiment with the phenomena of electricity and magnetism, figuring out stuff like electromagnetic induction. Let's just say this guy could turn boring into OMG. I can't stop thinking about this, faster than you can say Ohm's law. Faraday wasn't content with just being Davy's assistant for life. Nah, he needed his own glory. He eventually made groundbreaking discoveries in chemistry, electricity, and magnetism. Let's take a look at some of his major accomplishments. 1. Electromagnetic induction. Imagine trying to get electricity to flow through a wire by just wiggling a magnet nearby. Sounds like magic, right? Well, Faraday made that magic happen. He figured out how to generate an electric current with a moving magnet. Thank you, Faraday. Your work on electromagnetic induction is the reason we have generators and motors today. Without you, we'd probably still be trying to plug stuff into a campfire. 2. Faraday's law of induction. Okay, this one's for all you budding physicists out there. Faraday came up with a law that tells you how much electricity will be induced when you move a magnet near a wire. If you're confused, it's probably because you're not Michael Faraday. He figured it out. This is what powers things like electric generators and transformers today. So yeah, if you've ever had a light bulb turn on, you owe Faraday a drink. 3. The Faraday cage. Not to be outdone by his earlier accomplishments, Faraday also developed something called the Faraday cage, which essentially allows you to block out electric fields. This is why you can safely sit inside a car during a lightning storm without being zapped into oblivion. You're welcome, people who forget to check the weather app. 4. Electrolysis and chemistry. Faraday didn't just stop at physics, he went deep into chemistry too. He discovered how to split chemical compounds using electricity. You know, just the thing you need when you're trying to make sure that every chemical reaction goes according to plan. Electrolysis helped set the stage for modern chemistry and the understanding of atoms and ions. If you've ever used an alkaline battery, you can thank Faraday for that too. Now here's the funny part. Despite changing the world, Faraday was surprisingly humble like Kendrick Lamar. His refusal to pursue wealth or fame was downright odd by today's standards. He didn't care about winning prizes or collecting accolades, which is honestly a bit frustrating to me, but whatever. He was more into making discoveries, then getting back to his lab, like the mad scientist that never really leaves work. If you tried to give him a pat on the back, he probably just muttered something about getting back to his experiments, and went back to thinking about wires and magnets. Faraday kept working for most of his life like he was a slave to magnetism. Even though his health started to decline in his later years, he was getting old by science standards, like 60. What a joke. He kept showing up to his lab and pushing the boundaries of what people thought was possible. Not for him, though. He was the type who'd probably show up to the lab with one leg falling off and still try to make a motor out of it. Talk about dedication. Nowadays, you get a tickle in your throat and you call out sick. In 1855, Faraday became a professor at the Royal Institution. Not bad for the bookbinder's apprentice, huh? He even got to lecture on all his groundbreaking work, but he still had that modest attitude. Seriously, though, he was one of the first people to actually get that scientists don't just sit around and ponder. They make stuff happen. He was ahead of his time, constantly pushing the envelope like an overachieving Amazon Prime driver delivering knowledge. Sadly, Faraday's health started to go downhill in the 1860s faster than a wheel on a hill, but even then, he didn't stop working until the very end. He finally succumbed to a stroke on August 25, 1867. So yeah, Faraday lived to be 75. Pretty good for a guy who spent most of his life playing with electricity. He died a little bit like his experiments, suddenly but with a lot of impact. Now let's be real. Faraday's work is still pretty relevant today. The fact that your phone is charging right now? That's thanks to Faraday's laws of induction and electromagnetism. If you've ever used a motor, flipped a switch, or used a transformer, he's responsible for that too. He basically set the groundwork for modern electronics. Electric cars? Faraday probably didn't foresee that exact application, but without his work on electromagnetic induction and electricity, good luck with that Tesla. Want wireless communication? Well, guess what? That's grounded in Faraday's work with electric fields. You can even thank Faraday the next time your Bluetooth works without you needing to mess with wires, even though he probably wouldn't care. He was way too busy moving magnets around to think about Bluetooth. In conclusion, Michael Faraday wasn't just a brilliant scientist. He was a quiet, humble, electric wizard who zapped the world with knowledge. So the next time you switch on a light or listen to music on a wireless speaker, just remember, Faraday would probably be slightly embarrassed by how much we rely on his work. But hey, without him, we'd probably still be in the dark, literally. Thank you for tuning into this week's coverage on yet another influential figure that we have nearly forgotten about. Be sure to subscribe for more content. I'll see you on the next